I'm going to be discussing the poet Sylvia Plath and her poem Dialogue Between Ghost and Priest. Plath lived from 1932 to 1963. She was fairly young when she died, and this is because she actually committed suicide at the age of 30. Because of this and the dark nature of her poetry, Plath has garnered a reputation for being a madwoman. This word implicates that she was leaning more towards psychotic, but she actually suffered from severe depression, which affects over 3 million Americans annually in the present. Plath lived a normal life aside from her illness, marrying fellow poet Ted Hughes and having 2 children with him prior to her death. Her reputation also may stem from the stigma surrounding mental health and mental illness during Plath's life. There was little to no variation in treatment of different illnesses, causing many cases to be treated inadequately. Plath's poetry may not have had the dark undertones that it did, had her depression been treated effectively. Another reason for Plath's somber tone may have been the fact that she grew up during the Great Depression, surrounded by turmoil and sadness. Dialogue Between Ghost and Priest by Sylvia Plath. In the rectory garden on his evening walk, paced brisk Father Sean. A cold day, a sodden one it was, in black November. After a sliding rain, dew stood in chill sweat on each stalk, each thorn. Spring from wet earth, a blue haze hung caught in dark-webbed branches like a fabulous heron. Hauled sudden from solitude, hair prickling on his head, Father Sean perceived a ghost shaping itself from that mist. "How now, Father Sean," crisply addressed the ghost, wavering there, gauze-edged, smelling of wood smoke. "What manner of business are you on? From your blue pallor, I'd say you inhabited the frozen waste of hell, and not the fiery part. Yet to judge by that dazzled look, that noble mien, perhaps you've late quitted heaven." In voice furred with frost, ghost said to priest, "Neither of those countries do I frequent. Earth is my haunt." "Come, come," Father Sean gave an impatient shrug. "I don't ask you to spin some ridiculous fable of gilded harps or gnawing fire. Simply tell after your life's end what just epilogue God ordained to follow up your days. Is it such trouble to satisfy the questions of a curious old fool? In life, love gnawed my skin to this white bone. What love did then, love does now. Gnaws me through." "What love," asked Father Sean, "but too great love, of flawed earth flesh could cause this sorry pass? Some damned condition you are in, thinking never to have left the world. You grieve as though alive, shriveling in torment thus to atone as shade for sin that lured the blind man. The day of doom is not yet come. Until that time, a crock of dust is my dear horn." "Fond phantom," cried shocked Father Sean, "can there be such stubbornness? A soul grown feverish, clutching its dead body tree like a last storm-crossed leaf. Best get you gone to judgment in a higher court of grace. Repent, depart, before God's trump crack splits the sky." From that pale mist, ghost swore to priest, "There sits no higher court than man's red heart." So the literary device I'll be teaching is dialogue. The reason I chose this device is that dialogue is so rarely seen in poetry, and its use here is so glaring and prominent. I think that Plath mainly uses the dialogue here to emphasize the contrasting personalities of the 2 characters, and to develop them in a more effective way than narrative. For example, in the first portion I've highlighted here, we learn how the ghost appears to the priest based on the priest's description of him. We are also able to conclude that the priest is rather shallow in nature, as he uses the physical appearance of the ghost to infer whether he inhabits heaven or hell. So we have this image of a glowing blue apparition, and he informs the priest that he roams about earth in a voice furred with frost. This tells us that the ghost speaks softly with a hint of distaste for the priest's assumptions. In the next section, the priest further demonstrates flaws in his character with the entitled way he speaks to the ghost. He also acts as if the ghost has not answered his question, and we can deduce that this is due to his religious status. As a priest, he must maintain that after we die, we enter either heaven, hell, or purgatory, and so he refuses to accept that the ghost still walks the earth. I think the portion highlighted in yellow is really interesting and can be interpreted in many different ways. The way I personally see it is that the ghost is confined to earth because of a sin he committed out of love, especially because the priest goes on to ask him what kind of love could possibly condemn him to a fate like this. The highlighted portion of the dialogue in this section also stands out to me, especially the phrase, "You grieve as though alive." Plath is forcing the audience to question their perception of the afterlife by having the priest assert his own definition of the afterlife. It is also interesting to note that the priest seems to consider remaining on earth a worse punishment than residing in hell. I want to point out the blind man that Plath refers to here. I believe the blind man was the ghost in his earthly life, and the word blind refers to his being blinded by love and in turn committing sins of passion. This final section again reverts to the shallow attitude of the priest, referring to the ghost as stubborn for remaining on earth in order to stick to the teachings of his religion. He practically orders the ghost to appeal to judgment in God's higher court of grace, believing that God would not sentence someone to live out the rest of their days on earth. The ghost responds by saying that there sits no higher court than man's red heart. I believe this line summarizes the overall theme of the poem, and that is that the true definition of hell is being judged forever on earth by humans. The reason for this is that while God shows forgiveness, men are merciless and wrathful when it comes to the judgment of their peers. In forcing a ghost to remain bound to the earth, he is never provided with an escape from that judgment until the end of the world. The judgmental nature of man is exemplified by the priest's dialogue throughout the poem. He acts superior to the ghost because the ghost is serving a punishment and he is a man of God, when in reality the priest himself could do well to consider the ghost's statements about the character and nature of man.